Free agency frenzy on First and North. Teams can officially sign players starting tomorrow, but the first 2 days brought plenty of new deals. Hello, everyone, and welcome to First and North. I'm Cassie Carlson, joined this week by the voice of the Lions, Dan Miller. We have Brandon Cruz from Fox Milwaukee and Ahmad Hicks from Fox Minneapolis. Let's start with today's signings. After trading DJ Moore last week, the Bears bring in a veteran wide receiver, signing former Lions receiver Kalif Raymond to a one-year deal, adding even more to this Bears-Lions rivalry. Dan, we know how good he is in the return game. Since joining the Lions in 2021, he leads the NFL in punt return yards. What else will the Bears be getting in Raymond?
Well, number one, you're getting a great guy. You're getting somebody that will be a locker room favorite among reporters, among fans, and among the guys that he plays with. He is just somebody who's fought for everything he's ever earned in the NFL and fought through some really difficult times, and there's a lot of respect that comes Kalif's way. And the other thing you're getting in terms of his playing ability, yes, it's the return game, which he's very good at, but it's also his ability on the gadget plays that Ben Johnson is so good at drawing up. Kalif is fast. That's one thing that I think a lot of people don't realize about him if they haven't been around him. He was one of the fastest guys on this team. I'm assuming he'll be one of the fastest guys on the Bears. Got good hands, can get deep, can make big plays, get him in a little bit of space, and he can do some things. So, you know, he's not a guy that you're looking to catch 90 balls in a year or anything like that, but he is somebody that can change a game with a big play because of his elusiveness when he gets the ball in his hands.
Yeah, and the Bears need a veteran in that wide receiver room after losing DJ Moore, Olamide Zaccheaus. You talk about him being a good teammate. Amon-Ra St. Brown tweeted, Raymond was the greatest teammate I've ever had and was his locker mate since his rookie year. Darrington Evans said something similar and along those same lines. I want to go back to you, Dan, because they traded David Montgomery to the Texans last week. Today they bring in another running back, signing Isaiah Pacheco. Do you like this compliment to Jahmyr Gibbs?
Well, I like the fact that he was good in short yardage situations for Kansas City last year. But if you look at some of the numbers, they've been trending down for a couple of years. You can chalk that up to injuries, so I think health is going to be significant. Do I think Isaiah Pacheco is David Montgomery? No, I don't, based on what I've seen in the last couple of years. We also don't know if the Lions are done at this point in terms of adding something to that running back room. If he's healthy, he can be what the Lions need in terms of a complement to Jahmyr Gibbs, but that's going to be the big question. And when guys start to have injury issues in this league, it's almost a prove-it type thing that you can stay healthy because your availability is so important. But his style of running is what they need. Whether or not he can be there and be available, I think, is a question most people can have. And then I think on top of that, it's, okay, I can look at all these statistics from the last couple of years. Is that an indication that he is descending in his career and that his abilities are not what they were and won't get back to that? Or will health allow him to get back to some of the things that he did a couple of years ago?
And if he is good enough, they'll have a new nickname for that duo in the backfield. Center, a big position of need across the entire division. Drew Dahlman, Ryan Kelly retire, Elton Jenkins released, Tate Routledge replaced, Tyler Linderbaum reset the market with his 3-year, $81 million deal in Vegas. The Bears, everyone thought they might go after him. Instead, they trade for Patriot center Garrett Bradbury. And prior to his 1 year in New England, where he obviously went to a Super Bowl with a young quarterback in Drake May, he played 6 seasons in Minnesota. Ahmad, what can you tell us about him?
When healthy, he can be decent. When not healthy, he's not that good. Yeah, I'll say decent. I'm trying to be kind right now, not say too many bad things about him. I'll just say this. When he was here, the Vikings offensive line led the league in quarterback hits when Kirk Cousins was the quarterback. They could not protect the quarterback in that playoff game versus the Rams. What did they give up? 9 sacks? He was the starting center during that time. So he was not the answer here in Minnesota for the Vikings, which is why they let Bradbury walk, and they went out and experimented with Ryan Kelly last year, and then Blake Brandell, who was a guard who moved over to the center position. So, look, hats off to you guys for getting Bradbury, Cassie. I know that's probably exciting for you guys, but I just don't think he's the long-term solution. I think you guys will be on the market for a center here in another couple of years.
Interesting. Definitely much cheaper than going after a Linderbaum. I think everyone thought because he played every single snap for the Patriots last year, he didn't get a penalty called on him at all last season. Everyone thought he's going to be a stabilizer in the middle of the offensive line and maybe not fully replace what Drew Dahlman did, but be a veteran and also play next to his former teammate at NC State and Joe Thuney. I know Joe Thuney posted something on his Instagram of them playing together back in college, so I think he's definitely happy about the move. But availability on the offensive line has always been an issue for the Bears until last season, so let's hope that the best is ahead for Bradbury in Chicago. Ahmad, I want to go back to you. Did the retirement of Ryan Kelly come to a shock?
No, absolutely not. I mean, coming into joining the Minnesota Vikings, he had a pretty lengthy rap sheet when it came to injuries, and we all knew that was something that you had to be cautious about this season. And then, of course, he missed a significant chunk of time with concussions. He sustained 3 concussions this season. I want to say he only played in 5 or 6 games for the Vikings. So the writing was kind of on the wall. I asked him midseason last year, I said, hey, Ryan, how do you feel about everyone telling you maybe you should call it a career amid all the concussions you've had and sustained and things like that? And he looked at me and said, I don't care what anybody thinks or what they have to say. He said, I'm doing what's best for me. And I think ultimately he made the best decision that was best for him and his family by choosing to retire, because as we all know, concussions are nothing to play with.
Yeah, similar situation to Drew Dahlman is the belief there as well. Brandon, I want to go to you. Let's talk about the Packers a little bit. They solidified the interior of their line. They restructured Aaron Banks' deal and re-signed Nahshon Wright, making him one of the highest paid centers in the league. Do you like these moves and moving on from Elgton Jenkins?
Yeah, I think it's what they had to do. They knew that this was probably the way they would go because of the way that Ryan played when he took over at center for Elgton Jenkins, who was injured during the season. And because of how solid he played and what he brought to that line, it was a very solid offensive line. The Packers realized they didn't need to keep Jenkins. They could let him go and free up some money for the cap space, being able to pay Ryan. And then by restructuring Banks, they keep that interior line intact. And the one thing that you see with the Packers line is versatility, and Nahshon Wright is a perfect example of that, as he's been able to move around. Elgton Jenkins had been that guy. He wasn't the guy that wanted to go to center, mainly because of the contract that goes with being a center, but now that he's released and Ryan is there, the Packers are looking very strong again at that position, and it's something that has helped them throughout the years, and especially since Jordan Love took over as the quarterback.
Dan, let's talk about the new Lions center in Cade Mays. Everyone seems really happy about the value they got for him and replacing Tate Ratledge.
Well, I think when you compare 325 to 381, you feel better about that. But look, Linderbaum was obviously the guy that everybody would love to have, but not everybody can afford a $27 million center, and the Lions weren't going to be able to jump into that lottery. So, look, Mays is a guy who graded out very well last year as a pass protector. They believe he can get better as a run blocker. They love anybody that comes in and can work under Hank Fraley. They had to get a center. Mm-hmm. That was one of the chief things they had to do this offseason. And it had to be somebody who has played in this league. It couldn't be somebody that you just draft and plug in. I think if you want a definition of what went wrong with the Lions last year, or some of the things chiefly that went wrong for them, look at the 2 Vikings games. They had a miserable time trying to figure out that defense, get everybody in position. That's where Frank Ragnow excelled before his retirement last year and before an injury cut short his comeback last year. So they had to get somebody in there that could get everybody into position, do the job before the snap, do the job at the snap, and do the job after the snap. And they feel like Mays can be that guy. Again, if you go by the grades and people want to throw PFF out there and things like that, pass blocker, real good. Run blocker, not as good. But I think the Lions like 6'6", 325, and what they believe that Hank Fraley and Dan Campbell can do in terms of molding him into the kind of player that they want him to be. I think they're excited about this. I think they feel like it's a step forward for that offensive line. Not done yet. Still have some work to do on that line, but it's a big piece that they had to have this offseason.
Yeah, when you say not done yet, they released Taylor Decker. He requested that release. What kind of loss is that at left tackle?
Well, I mean, look, Taylor was here for a long time and did a lot of good things for this franchise and went through some really difficult times, and it was great to see him be able to enjoy the resurgence and come back and win a couple division titles and win a couple playoff games. But last year, when Taylor started to break down a little bit and wasn't practicing and was playing, look, I do the games with two offensive linemen, and they both thought that Taylor played pretty well last year. But there's always that question of cost versus how a team values a player, and sometimes as they get a little bit older in their career, those things can get out of sync, either in the eyes of the player or in the eyes of the team. And in this case, I think it was the eyes of the team, where maybe they wanted him to take a pay cut. We haven't really heard from anybody on this yet, but we know the discussions did not go well after he announced that he wanted to come back. So it does leave a hole at left tackle. They did sign Larry Borum, who started 11 games for Miami at right tackle last year. That feels like, former Bear, yep, that feels like a backup to me. There is the opportunity that they could draft a right tackle and move Panay to the left side. So I think there's another tackle coming in. The question is he a left tackle, or is it going to be a right tackle and Panay moves over to that side and plays there for the rest of his career? So I think there's still work to be done on that offensive line. Borum feels to me like the replacement for Dan Skipper, the swing guy who's also your sixth offensive lineman when you go to your jumbo package.
Well, as soon as Taylor Decker requested his release, everyone in Chicago is like, there's the Bears' answer at left tackle, especially as Ozzie Trapillo is going to be out deep into next season. Instead, they signed Braxton Jones, a former fifth-round pick, to a one-year, $5 million deal. Now, who knows if that's the only move they're going to make, so that leaves Braxton Jones and then Theo Benedict as the left tackles on their roster. And this comes after their offensive line coach, Dan Rochar, said he didn't know if they had any true, career left tackles on this roster. But clearly they see Braxton Jones, who has started 23 games, 17 games in his rookie season alone, until some injuries have bugged him over the last 2 years, where maybe he can work his way in training camp, and there's probably going to be a competition for that spot on the offensive line yet again. That's something the Bears have gotten used to. But I think you feel a lot better if they're only dealing with that spot. They could also draft one with those 4 picks that they have in the top 90, and you have the rest of your line all cleared up. And back to something Ahmad said about, Bradbury being decent. I was talking to Olin Kreutz, a former center for the Bears, and he said if you have Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson as your guards, your center doesn't have to be anything spectacular because those guys are so solid. Some other Bears news I want to get to really quick. They replaced Tremaine Edmonds, make a big splash with a linebacker, bringing in Devin Bush, has a ton of speed. And instead of going with Kevin Byard or Jaquan Brisker at safety, they are bringing in 26-year-old Super Bowl champion Coby Bryant, someone who has some more position flexibility, had 4 interceptions last season, can play free safety, can also play up in the box, and I think fits a little better in Dennis Allen's defense. As you're looking at all the moves they made, another big one is bringing back Case Keenum, third-string quarterback on a 2-year deal, 38 years old, going into his 15th season. He was contemplating retiring last year ahead of speaking with Ben Johnson about his vision for the Bears, what this offense was going to look like, and his role in that quarterback room, which is essentially being a coach for Caleb Williams. And right now they have Caleb Williams, Tyson Bagent, which has been in trade talks, and Case Keenum in that room. Brandon, I want to go back to you really quick. Packers traded for Zaire Franklin and signed corner Benjamin St-Juste. How do you feel like this beefs up their defense?
Well, it's interesting because to get Zaire Franklin, they traded Colby Wooden away, and he was one of their premier run stoppers, especially when Kenny Clark got traded to the Cowboys during the season. So it is an interesting move for them up there. And Zaire Franklin, he's 29. He's been solid with the Colts, but, he's there now to replace Rashawn Gary. Even though Rashawn Gary had a rough second half of the season, he still was a threat at all times and seemed to be great when Micah Parsons was out there, not so much when Parsons wasn't. So it'll be interesting to see how those two now, Franklin and Parsons, work together. And it'll be interesting to see what Jonathan Gannon looks to do with his defense now that he is the defensive coordinator and he needs more guys up front to try to stop the run. So I'm sure the Packers are not done making the moves there. But I don't know how much better they got bringing in Franklin and losing Gary at this point.
All right, we'll get into Rashawn Gary in a little bit, but for now we need to take a time out. When we return on First and North, we talk about all the players who left the division and are now on to new destinations. Stay with us. Welcome back to First and North. I'm Cassie Carlson, joined by Dan Miller, Brandon Cruz, and Ahmad Hicks. We are talking free agency, and it is a very fluid time of the year, so we are getting these deals coming in real time. So we just learned that former Bears cornerback Nahshon Wright signed a 1-year, $5.5 max deal with the New York Jets, completing an incredible story for a former third-round pick who is playing on a minimum prove-it deal with the Bears and ended up leading the entire league in takeaways last season. And one of the best players in the locker room, one of the greatest stories, now gets his payday and heads to New York to play for Aaron Glenn in that defense. So good for Nahshon Wright. Obviously, now you look at the cornerback room with the Bears, Jalen Johnson, Tyreek Stevenson. You have Terrell Smith coming back from injury. Seems like that could be another position group where they try to find some depth, knowing just what it means in Dennis Allen's offense. I want to talk about some of the other moves, and the biggest quarterback who was available on the free agent market was Malik Willis, who's headed to Miami with Hafley and Sullivan, and he finally gets his opportunity with some familiar faces. So this seemed to make sense for both sides, Brandon.
Yeah, I mean, it really does. And everybody seemed to realize the second that Jeff Hafley was hired and John Eric Sullivan had gone down as the GM, that Malik Willis was going to be their target. I mean, clearly he was the quarterback that was most sought after on the market. He knows those guys so well. And with Hafley being the defensive coordinator and seeing Willis every day as they worked up towards a game, he knows what he brings there. And then on top of it, obviously the work that he did on the field against the Bears, and whenever his number was called to back up Jordan Love, he delivered and really made a big difference in the ability for the Packers to continue to try to win with a backup quarterback. So now he gets his shot as the number one in Miami, and I think with the familiarity he has with the head coach and the GM, he has a really bright future, and the Dolphins really can go forward with him. And I think it's a big loss, obviously, for the Packers, but one that they fully expected and knew was going to happen because of what Willis had done in his time here in Green Bay.
All right, it's time for our weekly Vikings quarterback check-in. Ahmad, Geno Smith traded to the Jets. That rules him out for the Vikings, but a lot of steam around Kyler Murray to Minnesota. He will be officially released tomorrow, and I saw some reports that he's meeting with the Vikings. Do you like it?
Yeah, look, I don't love it, Cassie, but I do like it a little bit more than their quarterback situation last year. But I will say this, as Malik Willis was kind of written off by the NFL world, look how he cashed in this offseason. So it kind of brings a little bit of context for J.J. McCarthy. No, I'm not saying him and Malik Willis are in the same category, but I seem to think that young quarterbacks get written off a little early on. So what maybe as the Vikings are looking for a new veteran quarterback to bring in Kyler Murray, maybe this can be the start of something new for J.J. McCarthy to have a chance in a couple of years. That being said, Kyler Murray, yes, he is expected to be in Minnesota tomorrow, according to reports. And if things go well, the Vikings more than likely will end up signing him. This is an instant upgrade to that quarterback room because you need someone with NFL experience that's done it at a high level. He's a two-time Pro Bowl member with the Arizona Cardinals and things like that. And DeAndre Hopkins, his former receiver, thinks him and Justin Jefferson would have an instant connection, along with Jordan Addison and TJ Hockenson as well. So, yes, it is a bigger upgrade than last season. Do we love it here in Minnesota? Not so just yet, but if he comes out here, wins 14 games, take the team to the playoffs, I think the Vikings ownership will learn from their previous mistakes not to let him walk out that door without another contract. So that's where we stand right now in Minnesota.
KOC's latest project. Well, Packers also lose Romeo Doubs to the Patriots. Brandon, do you expect Matthew Golden to take a big step forward this season?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's where the Packers were going, especially with the way he performed late in the season. Obviously, he didn't have a lot of touchdowns. He had one against the Bears, but what they saw with him was a guy that could do what Romeo Doubs has been doing, and that's be the go-to guy for Jordan Love when he needs a completion, when he needs a first down, when he needs some big chunk yardage. He's a guy that can do it, and he's got speed. So the Packers are very happy with where Matthew Golden is and where he's going, and they knew that they weren't going to be paying Doubs what the Patriots offered, and therefore it was one of those situations where sure they would have liked to have kept him, but knew that he most likely was moving to a different place.
Dan, Alex Anzalone's contract, topic of discussion all year long. He was another one we were just talking about when a player gets released, how everyone else is like, oh my gosh, he'd be a perfect fit in this system, on this team. And he was one that Bears fans were like, well, he could fit on the Bears defense potentially at linebacker. Now he's with the Bucs after signing a 2-year deal, and it seemed like his first choice was not to move on from Detroit. What do you know?
No, I think he would have liked to have gotten a new deal from Detroit. He tried to get one this past season, got a little bit of a bump, but not what he was looking for. So I think the writing was on the wall that he was not going to be back here. And it goes back to what we talked about with Taylor Decker. There comes a point in a player's career, sometimes earlier, sometimes later, where it's a question of how they value you versus how they value your abilities. And again, I said it can go the other way, and it can. So look, Alex Anzalone's a heck of a player, and just like I was talking about earlier with Kalif, he's a heck of a locker room guy. He was a captain on this team. He was a leader on this team. He was here when the Dan Campbell era began and helped see this thing through and get everybody back on the winning track and winning divisions and things like that. So Alex will be missed around here. There's some guys the Lions have lost that will be missed. But it becomes difficult as you start winning games and putting a roster together to keep everybody. And they've prioritized some of the top guys, but it's cost a lot of money, and it's put them in the position where they're not able to keep all of the guys that they'd love to have. So for Alex, it's going back, home, played in Florida in college. So I'm sure he and his wife and his family will enjoy that. Like I said, tough one to see him walk out the door, but not a surprise based on what we'd seen unfold over the last year.
Yeah, the Bears winning is they're also in real time learning the reality of trying to rebuild a roster, knowing that you're not going to have a lot of the same guys in the locker room. Tremaine Edmonds, their linebacker, was a cap casualty this week. He saved up $15 million by cutting him. He goes to the New York Giants, gets to work with Harbaugh, and really behind a defensive line that's one of the highest paid in the entire league, bringing something extra to that second level. So he'll get another shot there. He was making $72 million on a 3-year deal, just very high paid for his position. And then the Bears also lose wide receiver Olamide Zaccheaus. He signs with the Falcons. Brandon, I want to go back to you because I got to say, seeing Rashawn Gary put up his goodbye post on Instagram prematurely, then taking it down, kind of made me happy. I mean, the fact that he said his Instagram got hacked and then he put it back up after he was traded to the Cowboys, you don't usually see this type of dysfunction in Green Bay. So we know he had most of his production last year, first half of the season, dropped off second half of the season. Did you see this move coming?
Oh, yeah, this was an obvious move. We knew pretty much once they lost to the Bears in the playoffs that was the last time we were going to see Rashawn Gary as a Packer. We knew that he was going to be traded or released before this deadline, and now that he's gone to the Cowboys, I think it's good for him in the sense that he gets to be back with Kenny Clark, and it also kind of frees him from the pressure that I think was building here because he didn't perform in the second half of the season to the way the Packers would have liked. The question now is, where do the Packers go with Zaire Franklin? Is he the answer? We don't know. I mentioned it earlier in the previous segment. But with Gary and his post, I found that kind of funny that he claimed it to be hacked, and all it was just premature letting everybody know he's out. Instead of just owning it and saying, well, I know I'm going somewhere. But at the same time, good on him. He did share some love for the Packers and the Packers fans once the trade became official. But in the meantime, it was a very expected move in Green Bay.
All right, Ahmad, really quick. Javon Hargrave retweeted something about if you're a defensive lineman and you want to get to the quarterback, Brian Flores' system is not for you. Is there some beef going on here?
I wouldn't say there's any beef. I think he probably just got tired of hearing fans that say he didn't do anything this past season. Harrison Phillips, who was with the Vikings, got traded to the Jets last year. He came out and said, this is a hard defense to play in for a defensive lineman. You don't get a lot of sacks. There's not a lot of glitz and glam there. Your job is to eat up space, free up space for the linebackers to go through. So, look, he may feel some type of way about all the fans saying something, but the fact of the matter is him and Jonathan Allen combined for only one more sack than their backup, Jalen Redmond. So Jalen Redmond got to the quarterback, so maybe it was just a Hargrave problem.
All right, Ahmad Hicks has the last word. Both of those guys released. All right, we need to take our final timeout. Is Jordan Addison trying to reunite with his college quarterback? We'll tell you next on First and North. All right, time to wrap up the show. This is the time of the year where players post all sorts of things on social media and you just wonder what it means. Well, Vikings wide receiver Jordan Addison posted this photo of him wearing a Bears Matt Forte jersey. Obviously, former teammates with Caleb Williams at USC. Ahmad, any insight to what this might mean? What's the subtweet here?
I think he's just a man of fashion. He likes to, coordinate his clothes with his bags and the cars that you see in the picture. I don't think there's any more to that. Maybe questionable fashion choice wearing the Bears jersey in the division, but he's a man of style. That's all I can say, Cassie.
All right, that's it, I guess. All right, that's going to do it for us on First and North. For Dan Miller, Brandon Cruz, Ahmad Hicks, I'm Cassie Carlson. We'll see you back here next week.